Stories are about problem solving. They're a problem framed in an extremely interesting way. If you think about the emotions that are actually triggered when you listen to a story, it's absolutely fascinating when you think about what's happening to the brain itself. This is just like a story arc in a film or television. We may initially feel stressed, which draws our attention into a situation's context, before moving on to empathy and then reward once the story is complete. So when you first get introduced to a story, your brain releases quite a lot of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And what that does is it instantly attracts your attention to the beginning of the story. Then, as we follow the character, and as we start to see how they are addressing the problem, we start to release different kinds of chemicals which allow us to empathize with the character. Then when the character realizes the solution, we release dopamine specifically, which is a chemical which rewards us. And then when we finally reach the end of the story, it's a perfect storm. Stress goes, it's all dopamine and empathy. What's so incredible about stories is they're empathy machines. So if you hook someone with a really good story, you force their brain to mirror the emotions and the feelings of the character in the story. If you manage to make your character really grateful to your product, then whoever's watching it doesn't really have a choice. They are going to be grateful as well. And on top of that, when you reach the end of a story that you've been really into, you release a huge amount of oxytocin, which is a hormone which basically makes you more trusting in that situation. So whether you like it or not, you end up trusting the solution, which in this case is your product. Our current mood also has a large influence on how we process and react to new information. If we're unhappy, we're less likely to be cheered by or respond positively to good news. If we're happy, however, we're much more likely to be receptive to good news. It's really important to judge where you put your advert in terms of the context. What the brain does is it can choose what it pays attention to. You're constantly scanning your environment for stuff which is important to you. And if something like that comes up, you will pay attention to it. If you are reading a piece of content and someone has put an advert in there that has no relevance to you, you will simply not even see it. Your brain does not allow that information in. So for publishers, you've got to take this into account. There's no point putting a beautifully crafted advert about trainers into a whole piece about the stock market, because people reading about that are just not interested. It will never get through that first informational filter. Because stories are so good at making us learn things, that's kind of what they're for, you have to be so careful what you allow your content to be paired up with. Because if you land your brand in the middle of a story about something you do not want associated with your brand, there's nothing you can do. It's been linked and you can't unlink it. So you absolutely have to beware of what story your advert is stepping into.